move to our next conversation, we're going to talk about the incredible efforts of our food producers and how we can better support them. I'm really excited for our next panelist because I was afraid she wasn't going to get here in time, and I love her, Daphne Ewing-Chow, who is a food and environmental journalist for Forbes. And I want to welcome the panelists, starting with Seanicaa Herron, the founder and executive director of the Freedmen Heirs Foundation. Yemi, a founder and director of Oko Farms. Leah Garcés, who is the CEO and president of Mercy for Animals, who I've known for such a long time. And an incredible leader that I truly love, Karen Washington, who is a farmer, an activist, a mentor, and co-owner of Rise and Root Farm. So please give them all a round of applause. And Daphne, over to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Sorry for being late. I'm glad I didn't hold anybody up. It's such an honor and a pleasure to be among these women revolutionaries who are changing their communities and the world. And today, as Danny said, we're going to be talking about producers and restaurateurs and what these ladies are going through as revolutionaries within these fields to make a change. So first of all, I just wanted to set the stage about, I guess, what the problem is. And I wanted to start with you, Karen. You've become famous for quite a few things, one of them being coining the term food apartheid. So I want to understand better, what does food apartheid mean as it relates to systemic inequalities in food systems? And if we understand this concept better, how can it help us in the fight for climate justice and food security?
Well, thank you for bringing that up, because when the term food desert was out there, I said, food desert? Like, who coined that term? And then I heard food mirage, and then I heard food swamp, and I said, wait a second, these are outsider terms designating the place that I lived. And it was that, I didn't have enough food, I didn't have access to healthy food, all this. And it says, wait a second, I do have food, but I don't have healthy food options. And so I coined the term food apartheid because what was missing, first of all, food desert is a location. It didn't get at the heart of the problem within my community that was based on race and the color of the skin, was based on where people live, demographics, and it was based on how much money you made. And so no one was talking about that. And so I coined the term because I wanted people to start talking about the food system that has for so long left so many people out. We talk about food that has now become commodified. We talk about food where it's supposed to be healthy, but there's a population of people that don't have healthy food options. Yes, we have the junk food, the processed food, the fast food, but we don't have healthy food options. And as a result, food has become a weapon. And you're starting to see diet-related diseases, illnesses. You're starting to see, even as a farmer, this wealth gap that we have. And so, folks, we need to sort of tear down the food system and look at it, because for so long we said the food system is broken and needs to be fixed, and a lot of you believe that, and I know a lot of, but I say no, it needs to change. And that change is shifting power back into the hands of the people who have been for so long left behind.
It's an amazing answer. Thank you. And speaking of these structural issues, I wanted to jump across to you, Seanicaa. The Freedmen Heirs Foundation really specializes in bridging the gaps between Black farmers and the marketplace. And I wanted to ask you, what are some of the challenges faced not only by Black farmers, but also by all historically marginalized farmers and smallholder farmers in getting to markets, in the marketplace? And what would if we had a better understanding and rectified these issues, how could they create more equality in our food systems?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone, and I'm super excited to be here. This is my first New York Climate Week. So when we're thinking in terms of Black farmers, I grew up in Mississippi from an agricultural family, and the same problems that Black farmers, historically marginalized farmers, faced over 100 years ago, they're still facing them today. Please do not think that things are any different. They just look different. And so from the perspective of what we do at Freedmen Heirs, or just to give a little bit of level setting, when you're looking at what the numbers say based off of USDA Census of Ag, so of course there may be some margin of error there in the numbers. However, Black farm numbers have declined 95% over the last 100 years. We were almost at 1 million Black farmers in 1920. Now we're at 41,000 if you think about farmers that said they were Black only. You gain 5,000 if they said they were Black in combination with another race. If you look at it from the land aspect of it, in 1920 we were around owning 41 million acres. Right now, Black farmers only own 5 million acres in this country. That is down close to 90%. So we still have a structural problem that is still centered around the same areas. Number one being access to capital or funding. That's pretty much an issue for all farmers, especially marginalized farmers. Access to what I like to call culturally relevant technical assistance, meaning technical assistance that is geared and directed towards the needs of those marginalized and underrepresented producers. They are not all created the same. It is not the same. What Black farmers face in the South is different from what Hispanic farmers may face on the West Coast, or what farmers may face here in the Northeast. And so we need to think through how we can create culturally relevant and have cultural competence in administering that technical assistance. And lastly, for me, I'm an ag economist by training, and so I'm always thinking about the market aspect of things and what that means for producers. Being denied access to markets over the last 100 years has been absolutely crucial and critical for the decline and loss in the number of Black farmers and the land. If farmers don't have access to markets in order to sell the goods that they grow, what are they supposed to do with that food? And how are they supposed to make a living? So when we're thinking about how or thinking about structurally changing that, and I think Ms. Karen made a great point, it's not about trying to fix it. There needs to be a new paradigm shift or a new way of thinking about it and new ways to integrate these farmers, Black farmers, as well as other historically underserved farmers, with access to capital, access to new market opportunities, access to technically sound technical assistance. And so a lot of the work that we do at Freedmen Heirs are around those three topical areas, and working with different stakeholders across the supply chain, other nonprofit organizations, and working directly with farmers in order to understand what their needs are and how we can help meet those needs in the way that is best suited for them.
Amazing. Those numbers are quite astounding. I had no idea. Yemi, your farm, Oko Farms, you specialize in aquaponics, which is still a relatively niche area in farming. Can you tell us more about aquaponics and how it contributes to environmental sustainability?
Aquaponics might be niche, but it is certainly not new. People have been farming in water for thousands of years. I visited the Chinampas earlier this year. I was in Bali last year, and I saw the sawatambeks, which are the fish and rice cultivation ponds in Peru, in Guatemala, in different parts of the world. You have this synthesis of fish and plants growing together. It developed primarily either as a way to hold on to water when during times of drought, or being able to grow food during times of flood. So both environmental extremes you cannot farm in. How do we figure out how to grow food when our country is flooded or our area is flooded? In Bangladesh right now, there are floating farms everywhere. Not everywhere, but they're becoming increasingly more popular because Bangladesh is facing unprecedented floods. And 90-something% of the population are farmers. So now the country and nonprofits are trying to figure out how to keep people farming, keep people fed. And in other parts of the world where there is drought and people are trying to hold on to as much water as possible, this system of food production actually allows you to recycle water indefinitely. So you're using about 80% less water to raise both fish and plants. And still be able to provide food security for your community. In the West, it's seen as niche and fancy, and it's done indoors using controlled environment technology. But what it is just farming. You're farming fish, and instead of dumping that fish wastewater, you simply mimic what nature does, which is you make that fish wastewater accessible to plants. Plants' roots take up that waste as nutrients. The water becomes clean for the fish, and you're able to grow food. And you can grow everything from rice to sweet potatoes to sorghum, all types of herbs, peppers, eggplant. Whatever it is you want to grow, you're able to grow, and also be able to raise freshwater fish. And what makes it advantageous in urban environments is because we have very limited access to space for production. So it can be done in a way where you're also you're utilizing space, you're raising fish, which is a local protein source, and you're also able to provide food. Can be done indoors, and it can be done outdoors. We've put aquaponics in classrooms, we've put them in backyards, we've put them on rooftops. It is very adaptable and scalable for your environment, and also the types of vegetables that you can grow and fish that you can raise are also very adaptable.
Amazing. And thank you for bringing in the global aspect. I'm from Barbados, and of course, as a small island developing state, we also have issues with land, and aquaponics is definitely something that is being explored by the government. So that's really useful to bring in that global aspect. Leah, two-part question for you. First of all, I wanted to know what is animal agriculture and just industrial agriculture doing to our environment and our communities by extension, and how can consumers and restaurants and producers work together to drive environmental change in their own animal-friendly practices?
Thank you for that question, and thanks for having me here today. It's also my first New York Climate Week, so I'm excited. What is industrial animal agriculture? Well, in the context of why we're all here this week, the most important takeaway is we won't reach our climate change goals unless we address industrial animal agriculture and unless we address consumption of animal products. And we need to reduce the consumption and production of those things. That is because of the detrimental impact on the environment, on communities, and on cruelty to animals. For example, a third of our arable land is used just to feed animals in factory farms rather than ourselves. That's just, if you look at the math and you do a trajectory out, we're going to run out of land. So we have to address that. We're having really important biodiverse areas, ecosystems being burnt down, being destroyed, habitat destruction. In my lifetime, the number of individual reptiles, birds, amphibians, and mammals has halved. And that is absolutely related to our overconsumption of animal products. And so this is critical for us to address. It's also having detrimental impacts on communities. In North Carolina, communities of color are having to breathe in pig feces that is sprayed onto their land, that comes into their keyholes, that's on their microwaves, that's on their stovetops. And also in slaughterhouses, the majority of people working in slaughterhouses are immigrants from Central and South America. and our immigration policy sort of enables that. And so there's abuse throughout this with this system. So in the context of this week, we can't reach our climate change goals if we don't address this problem. So what can restaurants, what can we as consumers do? And I think one of the most for the people who run restaurants in this room, who are chefs, one of the most underutilized and powerful tools we have is the nudge effect. Has anybody read that book? Right. So really, we have to encourage more plant-based eating. And one really effective tool to doing that is the nudge effect. And so we're leveraging the psychology of menu architecture in order to encourage other choices, to encourage more plant-based choices. Not taking away the choices, it's encouraging a choice. And so there's proven tools on how to do that as folks running restaurants, designing menus. So some examples, right? One of them is creating more exciting descriptions of your menu. So instead of saying vegan burrito, nobody wants that. You say the Southwest Smoky Sizzler, right? Yum. Gonna eat that. Other options include training your staff to be excited about those plant-based options. And when they come in, they're introducing that with excitement. Introducing things like the chef special, the chef recommendation. Other things like placement in the menu. So putting it at the top of the menu where your eyes naturally go. So there have been studies that show that when we do a vegan default, so there's a salad, there's a pasta, and you have to add the product, that there is a drastic reduction in people choosing to add it. So there are things we can do through this nudge philosophy, through the psychology of menu architecture that can really help focus folks toward a more environmentally friendly diet, because climate change does mean diet change, and we can really help shape that path.
Fantastic. And actually, that's perfect segue into some solutions. That's such a really cool idea for how to structure menus. And I wanted to move into a discussion around solutions. And of course, the first pillar around making change would be education. And I know all of you are involved in education in some way, shape, or form. And I just wanted to start with Yemi, because your aquaponics center is not just a food center, but it is an education center. And I wanted to hear your perspective on how this education within your community has contributed to a more secure food system, more balanced food system.
Aqua Farms does a lot of different types of education. I really believe that urban farms are an outdoor classroom. It is the point of contact for both young people and adults to understand what it actually takes to grow food and the environmental impact of food production. And also the impact of food production on the people who are growing the food. There's a huge disconnect. We talk a lot about chefs and glamorize food production from that perspective. But farmers are at the forefront of climate change most of the times. We were on that farm this summer when it was like 113 degrees. And people would come out and say, how do you do this? And I'm like, well, how do you think food gets on your table? Somebody has to do this. So just because we exist, and we exist in an urban environment, and we are, just right there outside. People walk by, they see us, they chat with us. That is a form of education. People get to see every day what it takes to grow food. We have children who come onto the farm. Many of them are seeing a farm for the first time. They ask for horses. We don't have them, but we have fish, and they love that we have animals. And it is a great opportunity for us to also engage visitors on animal welfare. We actually work with NYU Environmental Studies program on trying to create some sort of, foundation or something for fish welfare, because there isn't really one that exists. What does it mean to raise fish in a humane environment? What does it mean to raise them in a way where you're thinking about their psychological health? So square tanks with edges rather than round, because fish need edges. It makes them feel safe, giving them a place to hide when they need to hide. Little things like that make a big difference to their psychological health, which also reduces or increases their immune system. Most fish farmers add a lot of antibiotics to the feed. We cannot add antibiotics because our entire system runs on microbes. We need beneficial microbes to convert the fish waste into plant food. So antibiotics is not an option for us in any way. So how do you create a safe environment for psychologically and healthy, safe environment for your fish? So not only are the NYU students learning that and working on that, they're also engaging the public in that conversation. We teach people how to grow their own food. I personally don't think we can fully address food security without also giving people tools to be able to grow food for themselves, especially in urban environments. We saw what happened during COVID-19. Not everyone will want to grow their own food, but as many people as possible who have the tools and the knowledge and the means to grow their own food, the better. That is why we go into classrooms. That is why we go into, we work with nonprofits. We work with residential spaces, anywhere where people have a community and they're interested in growing their own food in their own way and growing food that is culturally relevant to them. We try to do that because we can't always depend on food being brought to us. We have to be able to grow food in our own communities. And then we cannot, we're here talking about the climate. Everyone's been saying it, the way we grow food, and not just the way we grow it, but what we also grow makes a huge impact on the climate. So what types of crops are we growing? How are we contributing to an ecologically diverse environment? Are the crops you're growing bringing in birds and different types of pollinators? As an aquaponics farm that's outdoors, we get to see all types of native bees and birds and creatures come in because we have water. That's something that a lot of people do not think about. I used to work at a farm years ago in Bed-Stuy where I would turn on the hose and I would literally be attacked by thirsty bees. You know what I mean? So having this mineralized water outdoors is a wonderful place for bees and other types of pollinators, and they come in to drink water. All these little things matter. And we should be eating food and eating a wide variety of foods that also contribute to a healthy, biodiverse climate. So when I think of food security, I also think of climate justice and climate security, and all of those things come together. And it is what we teach. We even try to engage folks who are not necessarily thinking about food, but maybe are thinking about art or thinking about fashion and textiles. We know that the fashion industry right now is contributing to an enormous amount of pollution. We work with people on growing natural dyes and fibers. We work with artists who teach people how to make natural paint with the flowers we grow. We work with textile artists who teach people how to dye, gently used clothing so that they can extend the life of their clothes. So this is what education looks like to me.
That's amazing.
Being able to engage people in different types of ways.
That's fantastic. And I know, Karen, you're also very passionate about education. You have Farm School NYC, which focuses on educating people around agriculture with a sort of a grassroots social justice approach. Can you tell me how this empowers communities to be a part of change and climate justice?
Because in order to educate people, the educators have to be part of the community. And for so long, we have been in silos. We've gone to conferences and looked around, and we always say, well, how many people look like us? And if we could count on our hands how many people were Black. We could also think about, again, on the stage, when people were talking about, food systems, our voices were not heard. And so we decided to bring out the people in our community, the elders who had so much knowledge because they grew up on farms, to come and also with our partners to come and build a curriculum that would reach out to the everyday person in our community. And so farm school is now, I think, 15 years old. The teachers are community people. The leaders are community people. And so you have that reciprocity, which is so, so important. I also want to bring to the forefront the conferences. In 2010, we've had the first Black Farmers in Urban Gardener Conference because, believe it or not, people didn't know that Black farmers existed. They didn't know Black farmers existed, and the narrative around farming has been co-opted so that a lot of people really in their minds were thinking that farm work was slave work. But no, wait a second, why we were brought here? We were brought here because of our knowledge of agriculture. And when you tell a young Black and brown child why your ancestors were brought here, that they were the ones to provide this food for this nation, cook for this nation. And so when you start telling that story, that strong narrative, all of a sudden that thing about slavery disappears because now you are engaged. You have a purpose of forming the agriculture and dining experience here in America. We still have a long way to go. We still have a long way to go to break down barriers. Education is the key. And I just saw my friend Tony Hillary walk in the room, who is a pioneer in educating young kids exactly where their food comes from, but also to be the next leaders in the dynamics of agriculture.
Wow. Thank you for that. And we just have less than 2 minutes, so I wanted to ask a two-part question for you, Leah and Seanicaa. So, Leah, you could take part A, and Seanicaa, you take part B. So, Leah, my question for part A is, what are some global best practices that food producers and restaurateurs can use to create more environmentally sustainable production? And Seanicaa, part 2 would be for you, that you can think about till I get to you, is as an agricultural economist, what are some of the economic impediments that food producers and restaurateurs face when trying to be more environmentally sustainable? So we'll start with you, Leah.
Yeah, I am going to have to repeat myself from last time, because the global best practices around the world, from Mumbai to London to LA, restaurateurs are practicing this nudge effect. So I know folks in Mumbai in a restaurant that are testing, and they are working on and measuring, which is fascinating, measuring what happens when their staff are trained and encouraging this. What happens when they call it this A/B testing? And so I think around the world that restaurants have this incredible ability, and then they can work with farmers on increasing those options and providing a market for alternatives. I'm keeping to my 30 seconds. Go.
All right. So quickly, I would say number one is rising input costs. Rising input costs for farmers, as well as rising input costs for chefs, restaurateurs. That is something that is a huge economic impediment, since we're in this era of an inflationary period. And then also, I would think that another economic impediment is working with distributors that are engaging minority farmers on one end, and also from a restaurant or a chef perspective is engaging with those specific distributors. Because in my research, what I found is that a lot of chefs or restaurateurs, as you said, Karen, they don't know where the Black farmers are to source the food. And so when we're thinking about economic pathways in conjunction with food pathways that Karen laid out for us so eloquently, is that those are impediments that, if are not overcome, we lose out. And so the farmer loses out, the restaurateur and the chef loses out as well. And so in thinking of ways to collaborate and work together to also provide economic viabilities for these small farmers, as well as bringing out the historical relevance and importance of these specific types of foods. Because a lot of foods that we eat and enjoy are not indigenous to this country. They were brought here with enslaved people. And so there's a story around that restaurateurs and chefs can make sure that the public knows and brings education along with it. But it starts with engaging these underserved farmers, specifically Black farmers.
Amazing. I find you ladies to be just so inspiring, and your energy is so infectious. I think the points that come across are social justice, justice for animals, education, traditional knowledge, and it all comes back to climate justice, and you can't have climate justice without any of these ingredients. So thank you so much.
Thank you all so much.